Hello, it's Mark Bernard from the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. And today I'm talking about the mandatory clause for context of the organization under ISO 27001. In ISO 27001, Information Security Management System, there are two parts to the auditable specification. The first part, clauses 4 to 10, describes a number of control points listed within the specification for the management system. These are considered to be mandatory. All of these controls, 148, have to be in place. And they cover topics like context of the organization, leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. The bottom half in Annex A, listed from A5 to A18, includes 113 control points. And these control points are used to integrate into different parts of the operational part of the business. That includes legal department, human resources, and information technology, as well as physical and environmental security in other parts, depending on the scope. Today we're going to talk about context of the organization. There are 8 control points in this section. Let's begin. Context of the organization. 4.1. Understanding the organization and its context. The organization shall determine external and internal issues. This often puzzles a lot of people. They wonder, well, what kind of issues could you possibly be talking about? Because we have no issues is usually the kind of comment that I hear. These issues are irrelevant to the purpose of the organization. So understanding the organization is very important. And they could affect the ability of the organization to achieve its mission. And also, along with that, its information security management system goals. From time to time, you're going to see, if you have a copy of the specification, you'll see this section. It says, Note, determining these issues refers to establishing the external and internal context of the organization considered in Clause 5.3 of the 3100, ISO 3100. This is basically a risk assessment process, a governance process that allows you to evaluate internal and external issues. It's not bad. It's pretty good. I use lots of different frameworks. This is not bad. But there's a better way to do this. I'm going to show you. Okay. For instance, if you want to understand the organization, I'm going to use my mission as an example. Go to the About Us part of the website on most businesses. And usually they have a number of, descriptions of the organization. It might start like this. This is a very formal approach on my website. Our mission, we will develop new cybersecurity knowledge and facilitate the transfer of this knowledge to other cybersecurity professionals who need to protect their communities and their businesses. Okay, that's our mission. Our values, we want to nurture a strong cybersecurity culture. We want to work with other cybersecurity professionals that share our same values. We want to promote career development, establish a center of excellence for cybersecurity, and leverage advanced technology to further cybersecurity evolution. So these are all very important. The value proposition is our cybersecurity program will help businesses control costs while improving employee and customer engagement. We will reduce business exposure to risks for the loss of information confidentiality, loss of program integrity, loss of availability, product services. We will deliver value and protect the business investment in cybersecurity. So this is a little bit of the overview of our business. Now, if you work in a finance company or you work in a manufacturing company, the context of your organization is going to be really different, but it's going to focus on what it is that your business does and what they deliver for products and services. So that's the first place to go. The next place to consider is looking at the COSO Enterprise Risk Management Framework. Now, if you're not familiar with this, there may be some people in your organization. You may have a chief risk officer, or you may have some people in finance. Maybe the chief financial officer has seen this before and understands what this is all about. So it talks about different types of risks, such as strategic, operations, reporting, and compliance. And then there's a number of activities that go on in the internal environment: objective setting, event identification, risk assessment, risk response, control activities, and information communication. And of course, the company can be broken up into different units. So there could be subsidiaries, there could be a business unit, could be divisions, there might be different entity levels. So that you could have like different branches or different businesses connected to the same business. So COSO will ask you about risk. So this is the internal and external context. And what they're talking about are, what are the organization's strategic risks? Okay. So, and risks are both positive and negative. So you have to understand that when we go down this list of risks, we're talking about things that could benefit the organization or things that could harm the organization. So emerging technology is a good example. So the organization might be able to take advantage of emerging technology in order to improve its how it processes its products and services. Strategic risk management, how it manages risk, is going to be very important. It has to be lined up to the goals and objectives of the organization. Social media is a really good example, actually, of what might happen. So social media is something that you can use to grow your business by communicating what your business does and getting more people involved and following the organization. But social media has both a positive and a negative. So social media can also be used by people who are not in favor of your organization, who want to spread a lot of counterintelligence, if you like. There's other risks too: market risks, compliance risks, reputation risks, operational risks, financial risks, valuation risks, liquidity risks, credit risk, compliance risks, and hazard risks. These are just to name a few of the potential enterprise risk management risks. These are the internal and external context for your organization. Now, a lot of ISO 27000 professionals probably aren't aware of this and probably don't approach this. Their understanding of ISO 27000 might be quite juvenile. They might be just starting out with ISO 27001 and not truly understand it. I've been working with the standard for almost 30 years, so this is the best way to build a program to get off on the right foot, is to use the ERM. Now, of course, depending on where your business lies in the critical infrastructure, are you in the housing market, energy, food supply, water supply, public health, transportation, security services, electrical, telecommunications, or economic sector? Maybe you're just making money. You're just a commercial business. Maybe you're in banking, credit union, stock market, or maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're producing some kind of a service to other organizations. But where are you in the supply chain? So this really gets to the supply chain. So what does the company do? What are the risks? The positive that could benefit the organization, the negative, which could also harm the organization or impede it from reaching its strategic goals and objectives. Okay? And where does it lie in the supply chain? So that will help you to identify what risks, both internal and external. ISO already plays a role in over 57 critical industries around the globe. So ISO is well known out there. 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So organizations shall determine who the interested parties are that are relevant to the information security management system. They'll also look at the requirements of these interested parties in relationship to the information security. And again, here we go with another note. The requirements of interested parties may include legal and regulatory requirements and contractual obligations. And they almost certainly do. And here's why I say that. So as part of the programs that I build a legal registry. And the legal registry has 4 components. It has statutes and laws. Statutes and laws such as Incorporation Act, Internal Revenue Agency, civil rights. These are all very important. These are laws that the organization has to operate by. The government is an interested party in how you run your business. There's regulations. Regulations like data protection regulation, payment card industry, or the New York State Department Financial Services Act, which is very, very good cybersecurity. These regulatory agencies are very, very interested, again, in how you run your business. Okay? Internal facing contracts include licensing for Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, whatever the software it is that you use. You may have all custom software, but Probably you are using some kind of commercial software. It might be COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software. We have an obligation, a legal obligation, to protect these organizations' code when we use their code to run on our systems, to run our businesses. So again, these are interested parties within our information security management system. Now, external facing contracts include customers, strategic partners, vendors, and suppliers. And customers, strategic partners, and vendors and suppliers almost certainly have an interest in what we're doing. And not only that, because these are external facing contracts, we do have some serious obligations that we need to follow. They probably have some compliance requirements. They may have a data protection schedule that we have to follow, or an information security policy that we have to follow. They have some type of requirements that we need to follow. So here you have it. So you have both expectations of interested parties, and those interested parties are sometimes internal facing and sometimes external facing. And in addition to that, other interested parties could be the stakeholders within your organization. So you have an information security governance committee. You also have different divisions, as we spoke about in the COSO framework. There may be different leaders in different parts of the world, in Europe or in Asia or in Africa, or where have you, in North America, South America. And those people also have an interest in how you run your program, if your program is an enterprise or a global level program. Now, 4.3, determining the scope of the information security management system. The organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of the information security management system to establish its scope. Now, here's how this works. This is very interesting. When determining the scope, the organization shall consider the external and internal issues referred to in 4.1. So the previously listed issues, internal and external issues, so the risks to the organization. B, the requirements referred to in 4.2. So those interested parties that have requirements that we must follow, whether they're laws or regulations or whether they're contractual obligations, okay, those have to also play into this process. And of course, interfaces and dependencies between activities performed within the organization and those that are performed by other organizations. So by the supply chain, perhaps we've outsourced some of our business. And the scope shall be available as documented information. So in the specification, you have to document this stuff. The best place to put 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 is into a business plan. Okay, so here's how I usually do the scope. It's a bubble chart, okay? The information security management system protects everything within, okay? So there are integration points within human resources. We don't run human resources. No, that's silly. But there are some requirements. There's like 6 or 7 controls that have to be in place in human resources for hiring employees, for onboarding employees, for exiting employees, making sure that assets are looked after. So those control points are listed. There's also control points for physical and environmental security. So we need to make sure that, we have access control, CCTV, we have a visitor policy, things like that. Making sure that assets don't go walking out the door, that people know who's authorized to remove assets, and there's some kind of a process. There's a number of physical and environmental security controls. And then there's the information technology integration, or the integration into information management processes, or the information communication technology part. So this is internal IT. And within this, we have assets. So we have software, hardware, people, telecom, and information. Right? And of course, we have a number of locations that are in scope. So we have assets that are in scope. We have locations, New York, London, Madrid, Toronto. These are all physical locations that are in scope. Now, there are also some things that are out of scope. So you need to also mention the things that are out of scope. Now, the way that this works is if you have an information system that's providing a service to somebody externally, and that information system has any sort of accounts payable or accounts receivable, or there's any kind of transaction systems, if it's attached to an SAP or an Oracle or another type of enterprise resource planning system, then that system also gets pulled into the scope. So I'm not going to be covering all the assets today that are included or could be included in the asset inventory. That's another control point that we could discuss at another point. But I did want to start off with clause 4 because it's the beginning. Now again, determining the scope. Now something else that might help you determine the scope is by going back to that enterprise resource or enterprise risk management process, looking at your product or your service and looking at the financial risks attached to it, strategic risks, hazard risks, compliance risks, and operational risks. And then from there, looking at the assets. So these are all labeled. So we have, again, people, information, software, hardware, telecommunications, and facilities that are used to deliver and protect financial risks. The same with strategic, hazard, compliance, and operational. And we may have some suppliers. So we may have some third parties in the supply chain that also help deliver some of the services. So for instance, if we're managing an internal payroll system and we have a benefits program, we may every 5 years go out to the market to find better or to see if there's any money that can be saved on benefits providers. So it's possible that we might use a supplier that way, or there's many other ways. Same with compliance. We may have a third party who's handling compliance of a particular aspect of some legal or contractual obligations. And the same with operational risk. You can have suppliers for all of these. This is called the risk universe, this dotted line that goes around our organization, around our products and services. And some of our risk universe extends beyond the universe. And these are the assets. Now, finally, 4.4, the organization shall establish, implement, maintain, continually improve an information security management system in accordance with the requirements of this international standard. This is a requirement. 4 to 10 are all mandatory clauses. You have to provide evidence of all of these being followed. So within continual improvement, we identify nonconformities. We determine the causes of the nonconformities. We evaluate actions to correct the nonconformities. We choose to implement corrective action. And then we record the results. So it's a very evidence-based cycle that goes around and around. And usually I integrate this within the risk management process. And I can't tell you exactly how I do that right now because we're running out of time. But continual improvement has to be applied somehow, somewhere. I'll show you an example actually. So information security management system, continual improvement. So you might recognize this framework. This is the NIST Cybersecurity framework. So we have a couple of upfront processes that we have to do. First, we have to identify the assets, where we are in the supply chain, so that we understand what it is that we need to protect. And then we have to implement the protection mechanisms for that. So that's the preparatory type of exercise. And then the next step is we need to monitor. So we have to have continual monitor, identifying, doing triage, notification. And then finally, when we do detect something that's more than an event, it's a security incident perhaps, then we want to kick off a playbook. So ideally you want to have playbooks designed for all the different types of scenarios that could happen to your organization. You want to practice with your team, make sure that everybody knows what their roles are, okay? And then you kick that off. And then you have a failover if required at the end. Finally, you're going to recover. You're going to come back to where you were at the beginning. Steady state, normal operations. Okay, so that's the full cycle of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And then at the end of this process, you want to collect information. You want to do a post-incident review or a lessons learned, and you want to take that feedback and you want to apply it to whatever the playbook is or the practices that you use, or maybe the controls need to be modified in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or we respond differently, or we treat it differently. But there's lessons learned. So this is a quality management approach. It's a full cycle. Every time you go through an incident, do a lessons learned, learn from that, and make adjustments to your process. Okay, and if it's not a big change, it's not a corrective immediate action, or it's more of a preventative action, then you might create a roadmap. And you might space that out over 3 years, because the ISO 27001 has a 3-year recertification cycle where all the controls will be reviewed. So you put it on the roadmap and then you manage it like a project. We've created a reference model to simplify clauses 4 to 10, 148 controls. We created a governance module, a risk management module, continual improvement module, an internal audit, external audit module. We also created communication strategy and awareness training, and finally document and record management. And this is a very slick process in order to make this trainable, so that you could teach other people this process and so that they can follow it quite easily. I want to thank you for your time. You can reach me at the following email address or phone number. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. If you like this video, you find it useful, please share it. Thank you. Take care now.